so in this video I wanted to talk about the trachea and the trachea's membrane. So what is the trachea? Well, the trachea is a part of your respiratory system, and it actually transports air into your lungs. So obviously it's very important because without it you wouldn't be able to breathe. But I'll just draw out the trachea. So this is your trachea, and it will actually transport air into your two lungs, right? Okay. So this part is your trachea, not to be confused with your bronchi. Sure, yeah. So this is your trachea. And today we're going to be talking about the a single part of the membrane. But there are other parts as well, which we'll talk about. So let's just take a little thin slice, and we can see that it looks like this. Okay, so this is your membrane, and this is what you call your lumen, which is basically the inside. Okay. If we took like a little piece of this membrane, then we would see several cells like this. Okay, and also cilia on the outside. Okay, and we'll go over why they're here and what they do in a second. Okay, now we also have our lumina propria, which is right here. Okay, and this is all basically what you call your mucosa. And your submucosas down here as well as other things, but we're not going to be talking about that in this video. In the next video we will. But this is called your mucosa. Okay? And your lumina propria, we'll start with that because it's the smallest topic today. It actually contains fibroblasts as well as several immune cells. And we're not going to be talking about the immune cells because that's part of the immune system, which we'll talk about in the future. But the lumina propria also has fibroblasts, which produce things like collagen and elastin, and those, in this case, help your trachea to be more elastic as well as have more structure. Elastin makes it more elastic. Anyways, moving on. What about these? These cells. These are goblet cells, okay? Okay, so they're going to be goblet cells around the membrane as well as cilia. Okay? And these goblet cells are what produce mucus. Well, they help to produce mucus. All of the mucus in your trachea. They don't produce all of it, but they help to produce all of it. Anyways, the cilia and the goblet cells work together to help form the mucociliary escalator. Okay? Mucociliary escalator. Okay. All right. So what does that mean? Well, what does it do? Well, your trachea, I'll draw it out again, needs to prevent any sort of particles from, any sort of foreign particles from entering your lungs, right? Because your lungs are pretty sensitive. So it does that using the mucociliary escalator. And what your mucociliary escalator does is it actually will grab dirt, or it will block dirt from entering your lungs, most of the dirt at least, or any sort of foreign particles. And then these cilia here will actually move they'll move, right? So if we draw them, they'll move the mucus back up to your throat. And when you have that mucus, and maybe you cough it up, that those foreign particles are removed from your respiratory system. So it sort of works to keep your lungs safe. So how do these cilia move? And how do these goblet cells produce mucus, right? Or mucin is what they actually produce, mucin. So they just help to produce mucus. So cilia, first of all, let's draw them out. I'll erase some of this. Can move by, so let's say this is your cilia, and there's a protein in it called dynein, okay? And dynein converts ATP into work, or sort of mechanical movement, right? Mechanical energy. So it will take ATP, and we've talked about ATP, and it will convert it into it will use the energy from ATP to actually move. And it can move the cilium as a whole by dynein works to move cilia as a whole by changing their concentrations. So for example, maybe we have lots of dynein on the right side. That would make the cilia move in a certain direction, right? So it will either move left or right depending on whether dynein is left or right of it. So if there are lots of dynein on the right, then the cilium might move in left or right because of that. If it was on the left, it would move in the other direction, right? So that's how these cilia actually move. Now your goblet cells. Your goblet cells will produce things, glycoproteins called mucin, okay? And so I'll draw it out. Like any other protein, mucin, or these glycoproteins, are produced by ribosomes and the whole process. We've gone over it, DNA to RNA to protein, right? But anyways, let's say that these goblet cells have produced this mucin already, okay? And I'll draw these little dots to represent the mucin, okay? I'm not going to draw many of the organelles, but yeah, hardly any of them. But anyways, these are our mucin. Okay, how are they going to leave? Well, they can leave the cell in one of two ways. Each one, right? Maybe you have one mucin. This guy will be able to leave the cell in one of two ways. Just, I guess, depending. It can either leave through granule exocytosis, or membrane shedding, okay? And these are very different, and one of them is actually regulated and the other is not. But we'll get into that in a second. So first of all, what does this look like? What will these forms of exiting the cell look like? Well, let's talk about granule exocytosis first. Okay, so let's draw the cell wall just so that it's bigger, you know? Okay, and now let's draw all of our little glycoproteins, or mucin is what we call it, mucin. And mucin is a constituent of mucus. But how will this exit the cell? Well, let's talk about something called granule exocytosis. Granule exocytosis. Okay? And what that looks like is, first of all, it will look like this. So a little vesicle of these particles, right, will come towards the membrane, all right? And it will sort of become part of the membrane, all right? And these three, I'm just drawing three, but it'll probably be lots more, will exit the cell like this, okay? And then they'll all leave, these 3 proteins. And then this vesicle here will just sort of come forward, and then the membrane will be whole again, will just be a full hole again. And the next way to do it is membrane shedding, all right? And membrane shedding is not regulated. So granule exocytosis is actually regulated depending on how much mucus your cell needs, or sorry, your trachea needs. But your membrane shedding actually does not depend on that. It will just happen whenever. So it's just sort of a constant, it's a constant situation. And if membrane shedding really needed to be stopped, transcription and translation factors would probably play a role. All right? If you don't know what those are, you can check out my other video. Now, what does this one look like, right? Well, this one would look like this. So it's called membrane shedding, and the title's pretty descriptive. But basically, you're losing a little piece of your membrane, kind of, because, well, this is what's happening. These three glycoproteins, or mucin is what you should call them, will come forward, and a little lump might come, and then well, where's my eraser? Okay. And then the membrane might come forward a little bit, right? And these 3 are here now, okay? And then come off as like a full little capsule, and then they'll be outside in the open, and these mucins, all right, will be out here, and they're a constituent of mucus, and they'll mix with the things out there to form mucus. And mucus, like we said earlier, will catch the dirt particles that you might, or like any sort of foreign particles that you might inhale, and then these cilia will transport them forward. So you can draw the whole sort of story here. So let's say you have a goblet cell, all right, and it produces its little glycoproteins or mucins, and it will exit in one of 2 ways, right? One of these ways, okay? And then once it has exited, it will help to form mucus on the outside, inside the trachea, right? So now maybe this is what the trachea looks like, okay? And you see this goblet cell is part of the wall, and then these cilia, right? They're going to be coated in mucus, right? And little foreign particles, let's draw them as triangles, okay, will be caught on this mucus, right? And then these cilia will actually move these particles up your trachea and out into outside of your lungs, right? And that's how it protects your lungs. This is called the mucociliary escalator, okay? I'm not sure if I spelled that correctly, I think. But it's called the mucociliary escalator, and it basically transports foreign particles away using mucus and cilia. And in the future, well, probably in the next video, we're going to be talking about the submucosa and all of the other layers in the trachea, and how they also contribute to the movement of foreign particles away from your lungs. And they also contribute to things like mucus production. So you saw that goblet cells only produce mucins, but other cells will also produce other things as well. And the lumina propria we'll come back to, or we'll come back to at least the immune cells that make it up, that are inside it, in the future. But that pretty much wraps up this video. I hope you guys found it entertaining. Thank you.